Hey everyone, let's dive right into an explainer that honestly completely transforms how we look at ancient biblical rituals, and more importantly, our own modern mental programming. Today, we're breaking down the core concepts from Marcio Bringhenti's really fascinating book, Sacrifice and Identity, From Sinner to New Creature in Christ. Now, right off the bat, I want to say this isn't just some dry historical review of ancient texts. It's actually a profound look at how humanity has historically tried to manage guilt, align with the divine, and ultimately find some peace.
To kick things off, let me ask you a very direct question. Are you still carrying around this incredibly heavy burden of chronic guilt for past mistakes when you literally don't have to? I mean, so many of us live our everyday lives feeling like we're constantly in a state of emotional or spiritual debt, right? We're on this exhausting treadmill trying to earn our peace, working tirelessly to pay off some invisible balance. But what if that whole paradigm is completely out of date? What if that endless, exhausting cycle of trying to prove your worth was actually canceled centuries ago?
All right, let's get into part 1, the purpose of sacrifices. So to really understand this, Bringhenti points out that the 66 books of the Bible actually map out this massive, ongoing spiritual evolution. From the very first pages, we see humanity using sacrifices to somehow bridge the gap between imperfect humans and a perfect God. But the author does something super interesting here. He connects these ancient, dusty rituals to very modern ideas. He brings in NLP, which is basically how our language and thoughts program our brains, and even quantum concepts of energetic frequencies. He suggests that a sacrifice was essentially an ancient method for people to mentally and physically tune themselves into a specific spiritual frequency. It's this state of deep alignment where your mind, your spirit, and divine principles are all broadcasting on the exact same channel.
Think back to the very beginning in the book of Genesis. Bringhenti points out that when you look at those early sacrifices, like Abel offering the best of his flock, or Noah building an altar right after the flood, or Abraham's acts of extreme devotion, these weren't just religious chores. They were actually profound ways for these individuals to tune their internal intentions into a frequency of gratitude and abundance. They weren't just burning things. They were physically demonstrating their faith. They were aligning their hearts with the divine, setting up a frequency of trust that allowed them to experience what the text describes as God's provision.
And that naturally brings us to part 2, frequencies of the Old Covenant.
As we move deeper into the Old Testament, the whole narrative shifts. A very structured system of law gets introduced, and with it comes a really heavy, cyclical reality. We start with Abel's offering of faith in Genesis, move on to the Passover lamb in Exodus, then the Day of Atonement in Leviticus, and eventually Solomon dedicating the temple. But the author emphasizes one glaring reality here. Under this Old Covenant, maintaining that spiritual frequency was just exhausting. Literally every sin, every impurity required yet another physical sacrifice. These rituals were purely temporary, meaning they had to be repeated constantly, over and over, just to keep that spiritual alignment intact.
Bringhenti brilliantly argues that the ancient Israelites used these incredibly specific physical actions to tap into the very same divine frequencies that we are still searching for today. For example, during the Passover, they engaged in a ritual that essentially locked them into a frequency of protection against the angel of death. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest was tapping directly into the frequency of purification. And when Solomon dedicated that massive temple, it was entirely about the frequency of consecration and experiencing the divine presence. They were chasing the exact same feelings of safety, purity, and connection that we chase today.
Let's just pause for a second and do a quick mental exercise. Imagine the sheer weight of living like that. How absolutely exhausting would it be to constantly try to pay for your own mistakes through your own endless efforts? To feel that your connection to peace is so incredibly fragile that just one little misstep means you have to start the whole process all over again? It's a massive burden of temporary fixes. The unconscious mind basically becomes trapped in this state of endless guilt, always feeling like it owes a debt that it can never ever fully settle.
But here is the monumental pivot. The author contrasts this Old Covenant, which again was temporary, repetitive, totally external, and relied heavily on animal sacrifice, with the New Covenant. This new paradigm is framed as permanent. It's internal, and it was sparked once, for all time, by Christ's ultimate sacrifice. It's presented as the absolute end of that endless, exhausting cycle we just talked about.
Which leads us straight into part 3, the ultimate sacrifice.
In the framework of this book, Christ wasn't just another historical sacrifice in a long, tiring line of rituals. Not at all. He is presented as the definitive event. Bringhenti explains that this specific sacrifice collapsed the need for all those physical, repetitive rituals. It acts as the ultimate, permanent frequency shift. By willingly taking on the ultimate sacrifice, Jesus is described as permanently tuning the spiritual frequency for all of humanity. It offers this direct, unbroken line to divine grace that doesn't rely on us constantly paying a toll.
To put that into perspective, the book outlines how Jesus perfectly fulfilled every single temporary frequency the Old Testament was desperately trying to achieve. He is described as the true Passover, offering ultimate protection. He's the final atonement, offering perfect purification that you don't need to repeat every single year. He is the living temple, offering eternal communion, meaning you no longer have to travel to a specific building just to find God. And finally, he offers final restoration, which is total, complete forgiveness. The temporary shadows are completely replaced by a permanent, solid reality.
Okay, so what do we do with all this? That brings us to part 4, assume your new identity.
Because it's not just about knowing the history, right? It's about taking this massive theological shift and actually applying it to your daily life. The author outlines 3 really actionable steps to help you step out of the identity of a condemned debtor. First, conscious dissociation of guilt. You literally have to consciously recognize that the debt is paid and intentionally discard that old identity. Second, reprogramming the mind. You have to allow your unconscious mind to absorb the reality of this grace. Swap out those old thoughts of scarcity with truths of unconditional love. And third, living in the frequency of abundance. When you finally stop trying to earn your salvation, all that wasted energy is freed up, allowing you to live in real gratitude and true spiritual prosperity.
And this is the absolute core psychological breakthrough of the entire book. The idea that you are no longer in treatment. Bringhenti argues powerfully that you don't have to live your life as a spiritual patient anymore, constantly taking your temperature, checking your symptoms of sin, and trying to self-medicate with good deeds. Instead, you are a reconfigured new creature. According to this premise, you have been fundamentally changed at your very core, entirely free to govern your life in peace, joy, and profound freedom.
There's this quote from the author Marcio Bringhenti that I just absolutely love. A little Christ helping to transform lives until after the end. It brings such intimacy and really such authority to everything we've talked about today. Because once you actually step into this new identity, you become an agent of transformation yourself. You become a living reflection of that grace, helping other people find their way out of those exhausting cycles of guilt and into the exact same permanent freedom you found.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought based on Bringhenti's work. The altar is clear. The frequency of grace is broadcasting right now, loud and clear. So, will you stay trapped in the temporary shadows of the past, constantly trying to pay off a debt that has already been cleared? Or will you step into this concept of permanent freedom, fully embracing your brand new identity? It's an incredibly fascinating perspective, and honestly, the choice is entirely yours.